This is the Out of Time Film Podcast, where your hosts Tom and John discuss everything from blockbuster films to TV and games like there's no tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the Out of Time Film Podcast. My name is Tom and as always I'm joined with my co-host John.
Hi.
And this week we are talking about Dune Part 2.
Oh my God. This film has been hyped. Like, so much promotion has been rolling out since this film has been delayed to March. And here we are, we're in March. And what's so funny about this film's promotion is that we've got the Dune popcorn bucket.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has seen that, yeah, there's just lots of memes around it, but it's just very funny that,
I don't even know if that exists here in the UK.
Well, we get really
feel like
crap
we don't.
popcorn buckets, Tom. We don't get these type of really good things because when they did Spider-Verse, they got popcorn buckets out of masks. I'm not joking. They got like Miles Morales' mask on a popcorn bucket. I don't know. They just did everything. They could do anything they want. And I'm like, oh, great. And we get the standard. We get the paper bag. It's fine. We get the thing that we get in the popcorn. You know, it's like that. But anyway, June Part 2. Here we are after 2 years. 2 years?
Yeah, 2.5.
2.5, yes. And oh my God, this has been such an experience to watch in the cinema again. Being in such a full cinema was just a pleasant surprise again because, you know, there's Barbie and there's Oppenheimer in August. It's been such an amazing experience to go. So, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this at a midnight showing, so it was a very
You mad
strange.
lad.
It was a very strange experience because on one hand I was like, "This is awesome." On the other hand, I was like, "Is this real? Am I alive right now?" I was pretty tired, especially by the end. Like, you know, with the final act, I was just there, just like, "What's going on?"
Oh my God, I don't know what I'm saying.
Like, there's been a lot of talk about this film being one of the best films of the century, you know, one of the best sequels ever made. And I don't know if I agree with that, but it's pretty damn good.
Yeah,
Like this,
it's
like
pretty good. It's pretty
everything
good.
I wanted from a Dune sequel, everything the first film promised and set up, this pretty much ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that I wasn't, not being familiar with the source material, the one thing that I wasn't expecting was how much more complex this film was. The first film is it has very basic binaries. You have your good and your evil, and there's not really a whole lot. There are hints of deeper nuances, but really in this film, we get to explore all of that in a really kind of, I thought, quite surprising way.
Yeah, we're not in spoilers yet, but it just really wasn't afraid to dig deeper into the world of Dune and like, okay, what elements that we can explore, like some really intense elements the film does not shy away from or explore, you know, Paul as a character, and he completely changes in the story. And the film has so much going on, which I was completely hooked all the way through because, well, in the first part, I was completely fine being at slow burner because the film was just building up to this world. You know, there was like an interesting pace in the first one, but the pacing was so good. I was just completely locked in the entire time, just like watching it. You know, oh my God, this is just taking me somewhere. But then the pacing just kind of fell off in the third act, where we were gonna have a massive resolution to the story. But then I was like, oh, okay, I'm back to the real world. Oh, great. The pacing was so good. I forgot I was existing in the cinema, but the film was kind of like a reflection to the first one, how Paul was part of Atreides and must become a leader one day. And that's the film when he unites with the Fremen in the story and with Chani as well.
Yeah, I think basically the two films put together, and I think when you do experience both films back to back, it creates a really full experience. I certainly had the criticism at the time of the first film that it felt a little bit like half a story. It felt like it just kind of ended. And I do feel like while part one works really well on its own, part two makes it better. Like most good sequels, the two together really creates a force to be reckoned with. And we'll talk about it a bit more later, but part three eventually, Messiah, if it is as good as these two, then we have an all-time trilogy on our hands. But yeah, like it really tracks Paul's journey from a boy to a man. It's not necessarily a happy journey, but we do see the growth of this character getting close to becoming who he was born to be, essentially. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So full spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't seen it, and I really would recommend seeing it. Get it on the biggest screen you can. Shell out for some IMAX tickets.
Or super
Yeah,
screen if you don't have
yes,
an IMAX near you. But IMAX, yeah, is brilliant. Let's get into
absolutely.
spoilers.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
Briefly explain the plot for those who don't know.
Paul Atreides unites with Chani and the Fremen while seeking revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. Facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the universe, he must prevent a terrible future only he can foresee.
Well, very
Wow.
interesting. I think
Very
one of the
interesting.
things that is really compelling about this is how it kind of is in dialogue with the future. So, in the sense that like the first film is full of these visions, and we get a couple of visions in this one too. None of those visions really are what end up happening. We kind of get,
Yeah.
various glimpses of various things, but we kind of get a whole different way. And it's interesting that you say in that synopsis that he needs to prevent this tyrannical future. But he kind of runs
He
straight
doesn't
into
he
it.
doesn't
No,
really
he
avoid it.
he yeah,
He's
he
just
just
like,
like
I must embrace it now. I must become leader.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah,
not what I was expecting. I would
yeah.
say that in all the characters in this film, the only character who is morally right is Chani.
Yes.
Other than that,
Yes.
every single character is just wrapped up by power and by prophecy and is basically, especially the good characters, especially, Paul and Jessica, they basically become the very thing that they have feared. And I thought that was very compelling. You
Very
have
compelling.
Jessica, who she begins, and she's one of the Bene Gesserit, but she doesn't really believe in that. She believes in her love for Paul over that, over the prophecy. She doesn't think that Paul should be perpetuating this prophecy of himself. But then, because she drinks the worm blood, because she has these visions, and because she starts to speak to her unborn child, she actually leans into that and she becomes the Reverend Mother for the Fremen and begins spreading this gospel of the prophet who is Paul. And I think that was very, very interesting. I think the whole film is kind of like really in conversation with religion and the
Yeah.
idea of blindly following a prophet, blindly following a belief. There are some really interesting characters like Javier Bardem's character, who's called Stalga. Is that his name?
Yeah, Stargate. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole time it's kind of a bit funny. Anytime Paul does anything, he's like,
Oh yeah.
I told you, he's the Messiah. Like Paul like eats like a sandwich and he's like, the prophecy foretold that the Messiah would eat a sandwich. And so it's like, it's really like he never doubts for a second that Paul is the Al-Gaib. Is that the name of the
Yeah,
yeah?
I think so. I
Yeah.
don't know.
There's so
Yeah.
many terms in Dune. I'm getting round to them. I'm learning them, but
Well, at least you got the book. You can
I
refer
do
them to
have
the
the
book.
book. Oh
Usul
yeah,
was
the Lisan Al Gaib.
yes.
So yeah, so he believes he is the Lisan Al Gaib, and he never wavers with that. But then there's a moment at the end when the other great houses refuse to recognize Paul as the new emperor. And so he says, right, okay, we'll declare war on them. Stalgo, get your people ready and send them to war. And you kind of get this look on Stalgo's face where he's like, oh, this is what I've done. In believing in this prophecy so blindly, believing in this person who I thought would free us, we've just become slaves to something else. And that's really, really compelling to kind of put these characters into the morally grey. Paul, as well, is somebody who at the beginning is like, I'm not a prophet, I'm just a guy. I just want to help save, I want to get revenge for what the Harkonnens did. I want to help Fremens be free. But at the end, he uses the prophecy for his own benefit so he can become the emperor, so he can get this power. And so also he can have the faith in people. He really exploits them. And that is just fascinating.
Yeah, that is a whole shift in characterization for Paul from the very beginning of the film. He does not want to become leader. You can definitely see that. And it completely changes when Paul drinks the water of life or the worm's blood. And essentially, he can see possible futures or something that he can control, and you use it like that future or that prophecy as a benefit to, take over the universe. And that's where Dune Messiah goes into, really, which I'm not going to spoil, but he goes into a lot about prophet and do we worship leaders in that story, in that sense? And that's what Paul goes into the story. It is completely different. He's like, no, I don't want to be leader. And then when he takes that speech, when the leaders come around in the story to talk about what's going to happen in the North, he's like completely taking it over. He tells everybody that I'm him, essentially. Like he's saying, oh, you must be afraid of me, of this prophet, this prophecy that I'm going to take over. And with Chani, I think she just serves a grand purpose in the story. She, as you said, she is the right moral character who really loves Paul, but Paul just gets into this world of prophecy and he just completely just gets corrupted by it, and he will just take this advantage with everybody, and that is a very terrifying thing for the very end of the movie. And Chani just gets on the worm, so it's like, okay, where is June Messiah gonna take us?
Yeah, I mean, Chani is truly the only one who puts her faith into Paul for the right reasons. She puts
Yeah.
her faith into him because he shows her that he can be trusted. She doesn't believe him immediately, and he has to prove that to her. And so she does follow him into battle. But at that point, she is wavering because, she literally says, this prophecy was meant to enslave us. And she's the only one who really gets that. I think everyone else really falls in line behind. I mean, there's an amazing shot where Paul is walking through a crowd of Fremen who are in a really densely packed space and are all parting for him. And the shot is like overhead, it's a bird's eye view. And we just kind of see thousands of heads with Paul kind of moving through the middle. And you just see this impact that he's had on this people that kind of desperately want this thing to be true because it means that they can be free and have their planet back. And yeah, I think since Zendaya got so little to do in the first
Oh
film,
yeah, in 5 minutes, yeah.
yeah, which I do not criticize at all. I think that is absolutely what that story needed. And I think the marketing was a real issue there. But in this film, she's all over it and she's brilliant. She
Yeah,
really is a
brilliant.
fantastic, especially in the third act. There is a particular moment where Paul has come out victorious and she just looks at him with such betrayal, but also an understanding of like, yeah, how could I not have known that you were going to be like this? And I think stuff like that is really brilliant because it just adds so many layers. And as you say, the final shot is of Chani about to get on that worm and the realization and the hatred that she now carries. And, that speaks volumes for, the potential future of this character.
Yeah, she just feels emotionally betrayed. That is like devastating, for the end of the film. She's been repulsed this entire journey, and it's a great way to close out the film. Like she kind of symbolizes us as the audience. We're trying to, experience the world of June, with Paul, but Paul completely changes, and we're like, what the heck? What is Paul cooking? What is he doing? So it is absolutely brilliant what they did with Chani.
Yeah, and I think that all really works well alongside the villainous characters as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Every single character is extremely layered here. Obviously, we have the introduction of Florence Pugh and Christopher Walken as the Emperor's daughter and the Emperor, who, they're not in it a whole lot, but what we do get from them is still really interesting. Like, you get to see where the seat of power is in this galaxy. What does that planet look like? What do the people in it look like? Like, what are their expectations of this place? And I felt like that was very interesting. It really is just Christopher Walken in space. It wasn't like it wasn't anything like you can really expect him to kind of start saying classic Christopher Walken things, but it was really interesting to see what that looks like. What is the Emperor? We've seen Baron Harkonnen, and so like, what does the true seat of power? But I thought what was really interesting was how we explore the Harkonnens as well. We go onto their planet. We see Dave Bautista's character Raban, and he is just so angry. He thinks the Fremen are rats, and he just wants them all gone. But also, he's like really insecure, and
He gets angry. Yeah, he gets angry.
yeah, and he's really kind of at the whim of the Baron, but also he's terrified. As soon as he sees the Lisan al Gaib, what he thinks is that he runs away immediately, and I thought that was very interesting. And then we get Fade Rather, Austin Butler, who is, I heard things before the film saying that he was one of like the best villain performances ever. People were comparing it to Heath Ledger's Joker or Javier Bardem's Anton Chigurh. I don't think it's that good, but I think it
Yeah,
was
I
pretty. I
agree.
think it's not on that level, but it was still a pretty great performance.
Yeah, it's a pretty good
As the
performance.
villain.
Yeah, I agree. Because when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But when I got into it, I thought he was just a good villain, like nothing really three-dimensional. he is pretty terrifying. But what I found super cool for Harkonnen's planet was that it's completely in black and white, like the
Mm.
black sun, and it just really was so mesmerizing to watch. And they had this gladiator battle type thing for Feydwater, and the cool thing was that all of the three fighters were supposed to be drugged against Aston Butler's character, but one of them isn't drugged, and they have this battle, and Feydwater really wants to have the battle of his life, and Baron, he's like, yes, I must give my nephew a good birthday or something. It's crazy. But with the Baron in the story, this is a big criticism. He just has a very underwhelming death. He just doesn't really have a final say for the story because he was a big conspirator against the Atreides, but the Baron doesn't really have anything to say, and it just felt like, oh, is there like no close off to the character, who the Baron, who he actually is, and what he's like. But no, it's just like, okay, gonna stab you in the back. That's it.
Yeah, the Baron is really set up as like this big bad character in the first one. They really kind of emphasize, that moment where he rises up and he's like, my desert, my Arrakis, my Dune. Like you really feel that he is this presence and that like he is powerful. And you do see that throughout this film, but a lot of it kind of is like, no, he's not the real power. The real power is the Emperor, and the real power is actually Paul. Like the power is constantly balancing to different ways. And I agree. I do think there is definitely a level of underwhelmingness about the fact that that character just kind of comes and goes so easily. I want to kind of go back to what you were saying about the Harkonnen planet. I really, really love that atmosphere and the way that when they're inside, there's a little bit more color, but there's less color outside because of that sun. And Feyd-Rautha is terrifying in that gladiator sequence. Then I was like, oh my god, this guy genuinely could be one of the all-time cinematic villains. Terrifying. The kind of black mouth, the way that he has this bloodthirsty expressions, and he is so drunk with the power that he has and the skill. Like that was really, really terrifying. It doesn't necessarily carry for the rest of the film. But I do think that was utterly brilliant. And as well at the end, that whole gladiator scene is so well built because you see how much of a physical threat he is. So when he's dueling Paul at the end, you really do wonder, is Paul going to make it out? And I mean, like, obviously he will make it out, but like there is that tension and there are those stakes that come from that moment. But what I found interesting about just the entire film was the different planets. We get 3 planets in this film, and we have another one in the first one. We've got Arrakis, we've got the Emperor's planet, the Atreides planet, and the Harkonnen planet. I don't know names. I'm sorry, this isn't Star Wars. I'm not as well versed. But we get those planets, and the warmest, both figuratively and literally, is Arrakis. What we see with the Fremen, we get the most sense of camaraderie and of culture and of happiness and of warmth. You really feel like you're part of it, and you really feel like these people are good and have things they believe in. In all the other planets, there isn't any of that. The Empress planet, it almost looks too pretty. It feels a little bit fake because of how nice everything is, because of how posh it all is, I guess. Like it's all like very grand, and obviously it's come from like a rich family, but there's nothing to that. There's no soul to it. And I feel like that's very much the point. The same in the Harkonnen planet. It's literally black and white. There's no color to it, and there is no feeling of character to anything. And that kind of speaks volumes to the worth of the Fremen. Like I think there's a lot of inspiration taken from Muslim culture in the presentation of the Fremen. And I think that it's really interesting to see that, especially when you think about Hollywood and the discourse surrounding Muslim representation. So commonly do we get films, especially post 9/11, films that are set in the Middle East that will depict conflicts and depict Islam as at the center of that. And it all spins into the war on terror and stuff like that. But here I thought it was very interesting to see a group of people that are Muslim presenting, that are unequivocally good and are the beating heart of this film. They are the center of it. It's certainly not any of the other planets. It's certainly not any of those other characters. As I say, Chani is like the center of this film emotionally. And yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting and really, like it wasn't where I expected it to go, considering how the first film is so focused on the Atreides, whereas this one is really interesting how they decide to spin that a bit.
Yeah. And the other thing was that going back to the film had so much going on, which I was really happy with. But the other thing is like there will be plot twists that will hit you and you will not realize in a bit. So like one of the plot twists was that Lady Jessica was actually a Harkonnen, like
Yeah.
in some way. My mind was like completely lost in the film. And it's like the amazing moments in the film that happened so far with the black and white Harkonnen's planet and Paul trying to ride on the massive worm, like
Oh
the
yeah.
grandfather worm. Like if you heard that in super screen and IMAX, that was super cool. I was like, oh my god, this is incredible. You feel the bass, you feel like everything that is just you're literally there. But yeah, Lady Jessica is a Harkonnen. She's the Baron's daughter. And that completely blew my mind after when I was thinking about the film. I was like, oh my God, yeah, this happened as well. That was an interesting concept to explore as well. Like, Paul was actually fighting against his other bloodline as well, like with the Harkonnen, but then he's got his own group of people to lead with. So it's like really conflicting for Paul to see how does he become leader. It's really interesting how they went through that and not like The Empire Strikes Back. It's like kind of crazy what they did with that whole thing with that
Yes.
story. Yeah, and expanding upon like what you said about like the Islamic culture, in the story, how it explores that, you can really see that they are trying to live a life, and the Emperor and the Harkonnens, they are just trying to take over planet with the spice that is really precious. So that is something that I haven't really thought about, but yeah, good point bringing that up.
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest issue with both of these films, part one and two, is structural. I think that there's a
Yes.
moment when this film cuts to the Harkonnen planet and we get maybe 20, 30 minutes away from Paul, and it kind of feels like the film is going from a steady pace to a bit of a crawl. It does slow down, and I feel like similar to the first film, as you said earlier. But at the same time, these are both incredible films. I mean, I feel like we talked about it quite a bit last week, but not as much this week. But this film looks immaculate. Greg Fraser's cinematography is really beautiful. So much of it is shot on location with natural light, and it works fantastically most of the time. I will say that sometimes the lighting, it doesn't necessarily favor the non-white actors, which is an ongoing issue in many films. And I do think that the choice to use natural light was sometimes a bit of a disadvantage there. But it does look incredible, and the music, Hans Zimmer takes the music to the next level, and all the sound design really and everything. And what I want to know, John, is
Yes.
do you prefer part one or part two? Because I've been wrestling with this and I really can't decide.
I want to say part one because part
I
one really hooked me
yeah.
in.
Yeah, I think I agree with part one, especially on rewatch, and I'm curious to see how this film will change based
And
on passage of time.
yeah, and the other thing was that when I said about the film's pacing, it is really good, but then it falls off. This is when the film completely just like loses touch and be like, okay, this is kind of a weird pacing right now. When they have a massive battle, that is super cool, by the way. Like the
Mm,
concept of that, so amazing to see that in super screen. But the film's promotions was like it's gonna be an all out scale war, like it's gonna be crazy, like with the worms and stuff. But it only happens for a couple minutes. I don't
yeah.
think it felt like a couple
I
minutes,
mean, if
but it
anything, like one of the final lines is "Now the Holy War begins" or something like that. Like we haven't even got to the war yet. That's next
yeah.
time.
That's next time. So it is crazy because the film had an amazing characterization. We are looking at Paul's journey and the other planets, and it's so amazing. But the film was building up to a battle that only lasted for like 5 minutes, and then the Emperor was like, "Okay, send you your best champion, which is Vader." But that whole fight, that was so intense. But that was only my biggest criticism because I was like really hooked in for the entire film. But then the battle only lasts for like 5 minutes, and it's like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, we could have expanded upon that. Like we could have seen Chani, you said she's a moral compass in the film, and really express why war is not the best option. It's not the
Yeah.
best option at all. It's like
Yeah,
completely
I feel like
devastating.
we are getting to that. Unlike a lot of trilogies, this really has pulled its punches and is really setting up part three to be the one that, explores all that. I mean, I guess we will see. Before we finish up, I do have an email here from Samuel Masson who
Hey,
says, "Hello there. Hopefully you've both loved Dune 2. I'm away this weekend and unfortunately won't be able to see it by the time this episode is out. But I've got a few questions for you anyway. Having seen the film, what do you want to see from the third installment? What plot lines need to be carried on? What characters would you like to see further developed? What actors/actresses would you like to see in the universe?" And a final question, what Dune house or faction could you see yourselves fitting into? Thanks for the pod and hard work, gents. Take care, Sam. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Sam. And that's a lot of questions there. I think we kind of already touched on part 3. I think, we kind of want it to be this kind of holy war, kind of show like all the factions and how that expands out. But I also want it to continue this descent of Paul's character. I think that'd be very interesting.
Yes, and to see where the role of leadership takes him to,
Mm.
because I just think it's going to be good from the look of things, because he's like
No, yeah.
completely corrupted.
It
So
looks like it's going to be a bit of a tragedy, really.
it's going to be leaning towards that in Dune Messiah. So hopefully Villeneuve gets that box office for Dune
Yes.
Messiah, because
I think he will, because the film is already tracking to do a lot better than it was supposed to. It might even hit
that is
200 million.
insane. So
Yeah, which is gonna it's easily gonna be the biggest film of the year so far. I hope we see all the characters again.
yeah,
And I don't really have any kind of like hopes for who could be added, but I would like to see more of the Emperor and his daughter, Christopher Walken and Florence Pugh. We have kind of downsized a little bit because we don't have the Baron and Rabad and Fade Ratha. They're all gone now, so like maybe we're gonna move away from the Harkonnens. I don't know, but this next one it has a lot to do. So final question: what Dune or House faction do you think you'd be part of?
honestly, I want to say the Atreides. That's what I
Okay.
can think of. I don't know. That is
Yeah, no, I would probably agree. It seems like they are the most honorable of all the great houses. I'd quite like to be a Fremen, really, but I think I
Oh,
genuinely think I wouldn't survive.
I
I
don't think
think
I would have survived as well
I
as
couldn't
a
do the
Fremen.
worm
Yeah.
walk. I couldn't ride a worm. My God, like no,
My
I'd die
God, the
so
balls to have to
quickly.
do that. The balls to do that. That
I
would be.
I
That
know,
is
for
insane.
real.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
So okay, we only have less than a minute left, so let's wrap
Uh,
it. What are you gonna give Dune Part 2 out of 10?
an 8 out of 10.
Brilliant. I'm going to give it a 9. Thank you everybody for watching. If you liked it and you're listening on YouTube, you can subscribe and like if you want to see more. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow and give us a 5-star review if you think we're worthy. And next week we will be doing Bottoms, which is a film from, way back in
Oh my God.
I don't even know when it came out in the UK, but even longer in the US. We finally got to cover it. And so we're going to be doing that. And I'm really excited to talk about that. And you can send us an email
Yes.
at lasttimefilmpod@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on Bottoms. Ask us any questions, and I'll answer it right here on the podcast next week.
And yes, you can follow us on Instagram at Out of Time Film Pod to see our incredible thumbnails from Zain Afzal. On Twitter for more thoughts from Tom, and TikTok to see edited clips, visual, also on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And you can find links to that all in the description below. Thanks to Jones-Meyer for the excellent theme, and Ronan Phillips for focus as always. And I think that is everything. Take what you're given.
Give nothing back.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.